In the films, and even in Star Wars The Clone Wars, General Grievous isn't all that dynamic of a character. In Revenge of the Sith, he's overshadowed by the film's other villains, and the Clone Wars had a bad habit of only rarely taking him seriously. Despite this, the good general has a fair few fans, some of whom even consider him their favourite Star Wars character. The scriptwriter of this video included. Some of this can be chalked up to the coolness factor. What's not to love about a murderous cyborg with lightsabers and 4 arms? But there's much more to General Grievous than that, and while he might not seem all that complex as a character, he plays a unique and interesting role in the mythos of Star Wars. General Grievous is a deconstruction of the Jedi, and in this video, we'll be analysing him in the detail he deserves.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Before we begin, as has become the norm for these character analyses, we'd like to quickly highlight some of our sources. We're going to be drawing on a broad set of legend sources today, but in particular, we'll be quoting a lot from the Revenge of the Sith novelization by Matthew Stover and Labyrinth of Evil by James Luceno. As always, we urge you to buy these books and give their authors the support they deserve, and with that out of the way, let's begin. General Grievous has been characterized in some wildly different ways over the years. In Revenge of the Sith and the Clone Wars, he's essentially a cartoon villain, if a particularly cool one. He's unambiguously evil, prone to rage-filled outbursts and evil cackles, and when defeated, he's well known for beating a hasty retreat. He stacks the odds in his favor, never fighting fair and overcoming the Jedi and clone army alike through overwhelming force. Some of this is part of his character in every depiction. Other parts change considerably. In the original Clone Wars micro-series, which was Grievous's first appearance, he's treated as a horror movie villain, a relentless, unstoppable monster who rarely speaks, which only adds to his intimidation factor. But as we've discussed in the past, our favourite depictions of the character are in the 2 novels we mentioned in the last section, Labyrinth of Evil and the Revenge of the Sith novelization. We think these portrayals get to the core of what Grievous's character is really about, and they do a good job of balancing the different aspects of his character that other stories present. That core essence of Grievous's character, we would argue, is summed up quite nicely pretty early in the Revenge of the Sith novelization. This is General Grievous, Durasteel, ceramic armorplast plated duranium, electro drivers and crystal circuitry. Within them, the remnants of a living being. He doesn't breathe, he doesn't eat, he cannot laugh, and he does not cry. A lifetime ago, he was an organic sentient being. A lifetime ago, he had friends, a family, an occupation. A lifetime ago, he had things to love and things to fear. Now, he has none of these. Instead, he has purpose. It's built into him. He is built to intimidate. The resemblance to a human skeleton melded with limbs styled after the legendary Krath war droids is entirely intentional. It is a face and form born of childhood's infinite nightmares. He is built to dominate. The ceramic armorplast plates protecting limbs and torso and face can stop a burst from a starfighter's laser cannon. Those indestructible arms are 10 times stronger than human and move with the blurring speed of electronic reflexes. He is built to eradicate. Those human-sized hands have human-sized fingers for exactly one reason: to hold a lightsaber. 4 of them hang inside his cloak. He's never constructed a lightsaber. He's never bought one, nor has he recovered one that was lost. Each and all he has taken from the dead hands of Jedi he has killed, personally. He has many such trophies. The 4 he carries with them are his particular favorites. One belonged to the interminable Kakruk, whom he had bested at Hypori. Another to the Viren Tessi Jedi Jumar, who had fallen at Vandos. The other 2 had been created by Puroth and Nistamal, whom Grievous had slaughtered together on the flame grass plains of Torvaskal, so that each would know the other's death as well as their own. These are murders he recalls with so much pleasure that touching these souvenirs with his hands of armorplast and durasteel brings him something resembling joy. but only resembling. He remembers joy. He remembers anger and frustration. He remembers grief and sorrow. He doesn't actually feel any of them. Not anymore. He's not designed for it. As we've discussed in past videos, each of the main secondary antagonists in the prequel trilogy is meant to represent an aspect of Darth Vader. Darth Maul is the obedient Sith apprentice, Count Dooku is the fallen Jedi, and General Grievous is more machine than man. But each of them take their respective traits farther than Vader does. In The Phantom Menace, Maul is more of a weapon of Sidious's creation than an independent being, while Count Dooku embodies the idea of a fallen Jedi driven by once noble intentions far more than Vader does. General Grievous, meanwhile, takes the idea of cyborg enhancement to its furthest extreme. On the physical level, this is pretty obvious. While Vader underwent extensive cybernetic reconstruction, Grievous was completely transformed. Only the bare essentials of his organic body remained: his brain, part of his face, his spinal cord, and a sack full of organs. What's more, his new body scarcely resembled his original one. As the above passage states, it was designed for a completely new purpose. On a physical level, Grievous had all but completely surrendered his humanity, metaphorically speaking of course, in favor of becoming a machine, retaining only what was required for the finished product to still be him on some level. As we've said in the past, the best depictions of General Grievous are the ones that lean hard into this, that make Grievous a machine inside as well as outside. The best versions of Grievous are soulless, bereft of genuine emotion or purpose besides that which he was built for. This is not a product of his cybernetic reconstruction, but who he has become, and perhaps who he had been even before this transformation took place, a machine at heart, bereft of a genuine feeling. As another passage from the Revenge of the Sith novelization puts it, his droid parts have more compassion than what remains of his alien flesh. Both inside and out, General Grievous is a machine, mostly. There's still a trace of who he once was, and it's enough to give him motivation and personality. It's enough for him to unambiguously count as being alive, but not enough for him to act like it. That's not to say that the best versions of Grievous make him completely static. As the Revenge of the Sith novelization states, he's still capable of experiencing something resembling joy. His long-standing animosity toward the Jedi is still tinged with things resembling anger and hatred, and if his name is anything to go by, he can at least recall things resembling sorrow and loss. But none of it's genuine anymore. Even the anger he's so prone to is just a programmed echo of a genuine feeling, something that, according to the Revenge of the Sith visual dictionary, is at least partly artificial, the product of brain implants meant to make him a more aggressive combatant. But on top of all of this, what makes General Grievous work as a character is how he relates to his hated Jedi enemies. All of the aforementioned elements of Grievous's characterization are abominable to the Jedi worldview, but at the same time, there are ways in which this version of Grievous almost mirrors the Jedi's stoic calm, the foundations of their philosophy, but in a twisted way. The same can be said of his performance in the battle. He uses lightsabers, and his cyborg enhancements allow him to do so on the same level as all but the most skilled Jedi duelists. He has superhuman speed, superhuman strength, and the supercomputers enhancing his brain allow him to think and react fast enough to mimic Jedi battle precognition. In a sense, Grievous is almost a caricature of the incomplete way some people think of the Jedi. He's got most of the same cool powers and trinkets at the Jedi, but without the fundamental essence of the Force. As far removed from that fundamental essence as possible, in fact. Grievous is a mockery of the Jedi, a twisted mirror image. The only thing he's missing is the one thing that actually makes the Jedi, Jedi. But we'll get back to that in a bit. Before we can truly understand the dichotomy between Grievous and the Jedi, we need to examine Grievous's character a little more, starting with his backstory. In another life, General Grievous was a Kaleesh warlord by the name of Kwaimain Jai Shilal, born on a resource-poor remote planet in the Outer Rim. In his time, Kali was under siege, beset by the armies of an insectoid species the Kaleesh knew as the Huk, who sought to enslave the Kaleesh. Under the leadership of Grievous and his cadre of elite warriors, the Izvoshra, the Kaleesh eventually drove the Huk from Kali and pursued them skyward. But then, to quote Labyrinth of Evil, Grievous had become infamous during the long conflict, conquering worlds, defeating grand armies, exterminating entire colonies of Huk. But instead of surrendering, as would have been the honorable course, the Huk had appealed to the Republic to intercede, and the Jedi had arrived on Kali. In what passed for negotiations, 50 Jedi Knights and Masters ready to loose their lightsabers on Grievous and his army. The Kaleesh were made to appear the aggressors. The reason was plain. Where Kali had little to offer in the way of trade, the Huk worlds were rich in ore and other resources lusted after by the Trade Federation and others. Chastised by the Republic, the Kaleesh founded. Sanctions and reparations were imposed, traders avoided the planet, Grievous's people starved and perished by the hundreds of thousands. The only chance at relief was offered by the intergalactic banking clan, which, always eager for investment opportunities, offered to take on Kali's debt in exchange for Grievous's services as an enforcer. Grievous took the job, but debt collection didn't really suit him, and he longed to lead armies in a real war once more. It's worth highlighting here that, when you consider his backstory, Grievous was an enemy of the Republic's own making. On this channel, we're usually pretty defensive of the Jedi, but they certainly weren't perfect, and their biggest flaw was their association with what was from the beginning an imperialist and exploitative Republic. The Republic's own abuses, which the Jedi aided and abetted, created General Grievous, and as monstrous as the General was, he was a monster that would not have existed without the corruption of the Republic. In a sense, Grievous's reign of terror was the Republic's own crimes coming back to haunt it. There are two versions of what happened after Grievous's time with the IGBC. One story claims that Grievous deserted the IGBC and returned to Kali, where he rallied the Izvoshra and set out to restart the Huk Wars, only for his shuttle to suffer a freak accident secretly engineered by Count Dooku and IGBC chairman San Hill. The resultant crash killed the Izvoshra and severely wounded Grievous, necessitating his reconstruction as a cyborg. In this version of the tale, Grievous's transformation is the result of Sith manipulation, with the end goal of bringing him firmly under Dooku's control. In another version of the story, which is referenced in Star Wars The Clone Wars, Grievous's transformation was a gradual process that he underwent of his own free will. It began with modifications that Grievous hoped would make him the equal of the Jedi, whom he resented and sought to become better than ever since their intervention in the Huk War. Over time, Grievous took on increasingly more modifications until he was completely transformed. These versions of the story provide different explanations for Grievous's psychological transformation as well. The first tale claims that Grievous lost a lover in the Huk War and that this experience emotionally deadened him. The second tale claims that the more Grievous modified himself, the more of his humanity he lost, and his desire for revenge against the Republic and the Jedi steadily drowned out all else. Both versions of Grievous's backstory end the same way, however, with Grievous transformed beyond recognition and his ties to Kali severed. He would go on to lead the armies of the CIS in the Clone Wars, becoming a favored pawn of the Sith. There's something else these two backstories have in common though. To some extent, Grievous's transformation is at least partially his choice, and unlike Darth Vader, he sees it as an improvement, believing his new body to be superior. In the second backstory, this is fairly straightforward. Grievous begins modifying himself of his own accord, and the Sith and IGBC only enable him. Even in the first backstory, however, Grievous makes the choice to undergo cybernetic reconstruction, and Dooku and the IGBC simply push him toward making that choice. To quote from Labyrinth of Evil, "After all the close calls on battlefields on his home system worlds, on Huck worlds, sowing destruction, exterminating as many of them as he could, after all the times he had returned home wounded, bloodied to the bone, surrounded by his wives and offspring, basking in their support, relying on it to recall him to life. After all the brushes with death, to be fatally injured in a shuttle crash. The unfairness, the indignity had cost him more pain than the injuries themselves. To be denied a warrior's death, as was his due. Floating, suspended in Bacta, keenly aware that no healing fluid or gamma blade wielded by living being or droid could repair his body. In moments of consciousness, seeing his wives and offspring gazing on his ravaged body from the far side of the permaglass. Offering words of encouragement, prayers for his return to health. He had asked himself, could he be content to be a mind in a body without feeling? More, could he abandon a life of combat for a life in which the only battles he fought were with himself? The struggle to endure, to live another day. No, it was beyond him. He told his would-be healers to fish him from the Bacta tank. He could bear to die in atmosphere or the vacuum of deep space, but not in liquid. In the shadow of felled trees that would fuel his funeral pyre, he lapsed in and out of consciousness. That was when Sand Hill paid him a second visit. Something consequential in his mind, obvious even to someone who could barely see straight. "We can keep you alive," Railthin Hill had whispered into Grievous's unimpaired ear. Others had promised as much. He pictured breathing devices, a hover platform, a surround of life-sustaining machines. But Hill had said, none of that. You will walk, you will speak, you will retain your memories, your mind. "I have my mind," Grievous had said. "What I lack is a body. Most of your internal organs are damaged beyond the repair of the finest surgeons," Hill had continued, "and you'll have to surrender even more than you already have. You will no longer know the pleasures of the flesh. Flesh is weak. You need only to gaze on me to see that." So he had allowed the Geonosians to go to work on him, constructing a duranium and ceramic shell for what little of him remained. Unlike Darth Vader, who saw his cyborg form as a prison, Grievous embraced the idea of cyborg enhancement. To an extent, he remained somewhat self-conscious about it, as several sources claim that he hated being mistaken for a droid, but on the whole, he believed his new body of duranium and crystal circuitry to be superior to flesh and bone. Speaking metaphorically again, Grievous wholeheartedly rejected his humanity, and in doing so, he wholeheartedly rejected the Force. That brings us back to his dichotomy with the Jedi. The Jedi considered General Grievous an abomination. They maintained a degree of sympathy for other separatist leaders, even Count Dooku himself, but they had nothing but revulsion for Grievous. This wasn't just because of Grievous's cruelty or his commitment to killing Jedi, but because of what he represented, a mockery of the Force itself. Any Star Wars fan could tell you that a Jedi's power came from the Force, and most could probably explain why that was. As the Force connected all living things, and even connected them with non-living things to an extent, Jedi were able to draw on those connections to influence others or strengthen themselves. Their power came from life and its interconnection. As Yoda said in The Empire Strikes Back, the Force was created and strengthened by life, which bound it together. Every fantastical thing the Jedi could do was the results of that interconnection, and the stronger a Jedi's connection to the life around them, the more powerful in the Force they became. This was something the Jedi had in common with the Sith and other Darksiders. The Sith's power too came from their connection to life around them, except unlike the Jedi, whose strength came from nurturing that life, the power of the Sith came from exploiting those bonds to drain others to strengthen themselves. But Grievous was different. His abilities were the product of technology, and unlike both the Jedi and the Sith, he had gained them by cutting himself off from life as much as possible, by transforming himself into a machine. He rejected the Force, and yet, to add insult to injury, he was able to mimic many Jedi abilities and even master lightsaber combat. For the Jedi, the different forms of lightsaber combat were each derived from the Force, but Grievous's enhancements not only allowed him to perfectly imitate all 7 forms without Force sensitivity, but his skill in lightsaber combat actually surpassed all but the most skilled Jedi duelists. From a certain point of view, Grievous was even more offensive to Jedi ideology than the Sith were. At least the Sith still got their power from their connection to the Force. Grievous did the exact opposite, and yet, to the discomfort of the Jedi, he was able to mimic many Jedi abilities quite well. To add further insult to injury, Grievous wasn't even driven entirely by anger or hatred toward the Jedi as the Sith were. As we said earlier, he didn't really feel those things anymore, and though he was programmed to experience and express something similar, he was driven to destroy the Jedi and crush the Republic simply because it was the purpose he had been rebuilt for. A passage from Labyrinth of Evil even suggests that Grievous believed that it was a weakness to be driven by anger and hatred as the Sith were. Perhaps Gunray had thought of him as some mindless entity, like the reawakened Gendai Dirge, or Dooku's misguided apprentice, Asajj Ventress, or the humanoid bounty hunter called Aurra Sing, all three of whom had been so driven by personal hatred of the Jedi that they had proved worthless, mere distractions, while Grievous went about the real business of the war. As the Jedi saw it, Grievous was just a machine, built to win. Except he wasn't. He had retained just enough of his original body that there was no denying his status as a living being. Grievous was not something that had been created without humanity, made entirely separate from the Force, as the Jedi saw droids, but an organic being that had chosen to reject those things in favor of becoming a machine. The Jedi found this ideologically uncomfortable, an abomination against the Force, and so did the Sith, for that matter. Even as they engineered Grievous's transformation, Dooku and Sidious were both repulsed by Grievous to a degree for the same reasons as the Jedi. Dooku more so than Sidious, both because he was elitist towards cyborgs and because Dooku still maintained a degree of respect for the Jedi arts that Grievous desecrated. And from a Jedi point of view, what Grievous did was indeed a desecration of the Jedi arts. Even the Jedi's lightsaber forms were fundamentally based in the Force. If you don't believe us, we've got roughly an hour's worth of videos explaining the philosophy behind each form for you to go watch next. In a sense, Dooku never taught Grievous the forms themselves, just how to mimic them, and Dooku himself was annoyed with how Grievous understood lightsaber combat as simply as a set of moves to follow, rather than as the philosophies they were. But despite this, Grievous was able to mimic all of the 7 forms near perfectly. Much like the other Jedi techniques he imitated, he drained them of their meaning, reducing them to simple mechanical motions. But despite having ripped out the hearts of these forms, Grievous was still more effective with them than many genuine lightsaber masters. Jedi who had devoted decades to understanding and mastering forms of lightsaber combat were quickly and unceremoniously slaughtered by a being who not only lacked genuine understanding of and experience with the forms, but in some cases was able to learn to mimic them on the fly thanks to the analytical abilities of the supercomputers connected to his brain. To quote from Labyrinth of Evil, Grievous was well trained in the Jedi arts. Mace could recognize the hand of Dooku in the general's training and technique. His strikes were as forceful as any Mace had ever had to counter, and his speed was astonishing. But he didn't know Vapad, the technique of dark flirtation in which Mace excelled. The loss of his Magna Guards was noted by whatever computers were slaved to Grievous's organic brain, but the loss neither distracted nor slowed him. His sole setting was attack. Successful at analyzing Mace's lightsaber style, those same computers suggested that Grievous alter his stance and posture along with the angle of his parries, riposts, and thrusts. The result wasn't Vapad, but it was close enough. Mace Windu spent decades developing Vapad, a technique so challenging that he was its only master, and only 3 or 4 others had ever tried to learn it. But in a matter of seconds, Grievous was able to analyze and replicate the motions of it. Vapad was more than just a series of lightsaber moves, so Grievous hadn't really learned the technique, but as Windu observed, his imitation got pretty close. Lightsaber combat wasn't the only Jedi technique Grievous could mimic either. The supercomputers hooked up to his brain worked fast enough to rival the Force-enhanced perceptions of Jedi. As seen in Revenge of the Sith, He was strong enough that he could dent bomber-grade starfighter armor with a single punch, and his own armor was extremely durable. And Grievous was fast, unimaginably so, faster than even the most advanced force speed techniques that could make a Jedi. To quote the Revenge of the Sith novelization, the electro drivers powering Grievous's mechanical arms let each of the 4 attack thrice in a single second. Integrated by combat algorithms in the biodroid's electronic network of peripheral processors, each of the 12 strikes per second came from a different angle with different speed and intensity. An unpredictably broken rhythm of slashes, chops, and stabs, of which every single one could take Obi-Wan's life. Grievous, snarling fury ramped up the intensity and velocity of his attacks, 16 per second, 18, until finally, at 20 strikes per second, he overloaded Obi-Wan's defense. There were, of course, Jedi techniques that Grievous couldn't mimic, such as telekinesis or the ability to affect minds. But Grievous made up for this with special abilities of his own. He used psychological warfare to wear Jedi down and inhibit use of the Force, and his 4 arms gave him a distinct advantage against most opponents. As we said earlier, he was a machine built to win, and few things give you a better chance of winning than cheating. Grievous's battle tactics worked in a similar way. He was known for relying on overwhelming force to win battles, and when that wasn't an option, he would often resort to intimidation. During the later stages of the war, he exploited the fear many loyalists had for him by building 2 duplicate flagships, the Lucid Voice and the Colloquoid Swarm, which he put in charge of decoy fleets to trick enemy commanders into thinking he was personally overseeing particular assaults. For the most part though, Grievous's approach to war was simple, overwhelming brute force without regard for casualties. He had the advantage of numbers and could rely on endless waves of droid reinforcements, and he leaned into it hard, to great effect. Many decried this as uncreative and honorless, but to Grievous, it was simply logical. His job wasn't to give the enemy a fair fight after all, but to crush them utterly. There's honor, and then there's victory. That was also his rationale when it came to battles with Jedi. His penchant to use 4 lightsabers at once was another desecration of the Jedi arts. Simple dual wielding was frowned upon by many Jedi swordmasters, and among those Jedi who did use multiple sabers, dual wielding was seen as a philosophy of its own, one with unique challenges for the wielder. Grievous, as with other elements of lightsaber combat, disregarded all of this to gain an advantage over his enemies. Most vexingly of all for the Jedi, these tactics worked. Grievous beat them at their own game quite often, killing many Jedi over the course of the Clone Wars, from inexperienced Padawans to some of the Order's finest masters. This was Grievous's greatest insult because, on some level, it suggested that the Jedi way, the Force itself, had become obsolete. With every Jedi Grievous slew, it was a triumph of technology over the Force, and that was an ideological challenge to the Jedi, with stakes nearly as high as the challenge posed by the Sith themselves. One of the less appreciated themes of Star Wars is the conflict between technology and humanity, or between technology and the Force. We touched on this in our video about the major themes of the Star Wars saga, but it's worth exploring in more depth here, because that's really what General Grievous's character is meant to be about. For all its cool spaceships and weapons, Star Wars makes the case that technology matters far less than we think, and though it isn't anti-technology by any stretch, it does look down on the arrogant belief that tech trumps all. The protagonists of Star Wars are often less technologically advanced than their enemies, if still far more advanced than us, and that they so often triumph in spite of the odds is part of the point of the saga. Darth Vader says in A New Hope that no technological era can compare to the power of the Force, but General Grievous is a challenge to that idea. He's a technological terror designed as a caricature of the power of the Force, and to an extent, he counters the power of the Force as well. His use of fear, surprise, and intimidation in combat was designed to put Jedi off balance, to prevent them from concentrating enough to use the Force effectively. In some instances, Grievous even attempted to weaponize the Jedi's connection to the Force for his own uses. In the Battle of Belderone, as detailed in Labyrinth of Evil, he ordered his fleet to destroy a convoy of refugee transports with the knowledge that the mass slaughter of innocents would distract the Jedi and disrupt their connections to the Force, buying the Separatist Council time to escape the battlefield. But all of this really just amounts to diversionary tactics because, at the end of the day, Vader was right. No technological terror, not even General Grievous, was a match for the power of the Force. The best he could do was distract his Jedi opponents, to bait them into playing to his strengths instead of their own. We said earlier that Grievous could be considered a caricature of the incomplete way people think of the Jedi, as just warriors with cool powers and lightsabers. Grievous's greatest ability was to scare Jedi into acting like it, into relying on their lightsabers instead of the Force. When they did that, they were doomed. No matter how strong, fast, or skilled they were, Grievous was better. But against those Jedi with the strength of will to not be rattled, those who remembered to rely on the Force, Grievous didn't stand a chance. To quote the Revenge of the Sith novelization, "The electro drivers that powered Grievous's limbs could move them faster than the human eye can see. When he swung his arm, it and his fist and the lightsaber within it would literally vanish, wiped from existence by sheer mind-numbing speed. An imitation quantum event. No human being could move remotely as fast as Grievous, not even Obi-Wan. But he didn't have to. In the Force, part of him was Grievous's intent to slaughter, and the surge from intent to action translated to Obi-Wan's response without thought. He had no need for a plan, no use for tactics. He had the Force. In the quarter of a second, while even Grievous's electronically enhanced reflexes had him startled and distracted, the part of the Force that was Obi-Wan tried a little trick, a secret one that it had been saving up for just such an occasion as this. Because all there on the bridge was one in the Force. From the gross structure of the ship itself to the quantum dance of the electron shells of individual atoms. And because, after all, the nerves and muscles of the biodroid general were creations of electronics and duranium, not living tissue with will of its own. It was just barely possible that with exactly the right twist of his mind, in that one vulnerable quarter of a second while Grievous was distracted, Obi-Wan might be able to temporarily reverse the polarity of the electro drivers in the General's mechanical hands. Which is exactly what he did. Durasteel fingers sprang open, and 2 lightsabers fell free. General Grievous was a twisted mirror image of the Jedi. A nightmare given form, but in the end, he couldn't challenge the Force. The power of the Jedi went far beyond physical strength and speed, far beyond skill with the lightsaber. It was a power that came from life, from community, from the simple but infinite might of interconnection. And it was a power that Grievous, who had forsaken such things to become a machine, could never understand. So, that's our analysis of General Grievous, one of the most underappreciated antagonists of the Star Wars saga. But what do you think? Did our analysis miss anything? Do you think we got something wrong? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.